Hey there, I'm Arun and
And I'm David Jansen.
and you're listening to the Revenue Funnel Optimization Podcast by FunnelEnvy.
This show's for B2B marketers, demand gen teams, and go-to-market folks who are over the hype and want the real stuff.
We're talking about what actually drives results across the funnel. Experiments, website optimization, buyer journeys that convert, not just vanity metrics.
It's tactical, it's honest, and sometimes it's messy.
That's how real revenue gets made. So let's get into it.
It is concerning. In general, the shorter form experience, the more you're going to capture through it. It becomes a game of how much effort and friction we want to have in that form experience and how much information is actually required for the post-lead prospecting experience with marketing and sales to actually qualify and nurture that lead.
Hey, David. So, as we know, we recently had one of our clients come to us with a problem. They were getting a bunch of inbound leads, but not really able to figure out from the data that they were capturing what audience they were in. Like many of our customers and people listening to this, they target multiple audiences. And so by not being able to figure out what audience they were in, by not being able to rely on the enrichment providers, in this case, they were capturing leads from a relatively small and fragmented market. So enrichment providers couldn't really cover the data points needed to effectively segment those leads. Because of all of that, they weren't able to, run really effective campaigns over email, over paid media, on their sales calls because, they didn't know who those prospects were and what the right offer for them is. So we're working with them on helping them implement a strategy for this. But I suspect it's a problem that, a lot of folks out there have where they just don't have good enough data on those leads filling out forms to be able to market to them after they fill out the form. And at the end of the day, if it's all about revenue conversion, that part's really important. So, maybe we can walk through what we're doing over there and how, customers can think about this.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's going to be a great use case that a lot of other folks will likely benefit from and relate to for a few reasons. First, as you mentioned, enrichment data providers, they're often not able to provide granular enough information about a specific lead or even company or industry type for a lot of the customers that we work with. And it really requires a level deeper in it. That's where we're at. That's what we're seeing really across the market is much more complex segmenting, a lot more relevant leads, prospects. They're demanding like much more relevant experiences than kind of overarching buckets and these large generic segments that historically folks have been put into. So we started working with this customer and we were already gathering a certain level of segment information. But after speaking with their sales teams, it became very evident that that level was not granular enough. And this was actually a quite interesting problem that has now led to more of an organizational shift for this company, where previously all marketing efforts were focused on these bigger bucket segments. And we all know about the silo that often takes place between marketing and sales teams. We were able to break that down and really get to the root of the issue, where there actually were these micro segments that how the sales would organize and go after these leads were on a much more granular level. So we already had the groundwork in place for this customer. We had a streamlined lead form experience. We're only gathering really the bare essential information required to qualify that lead with an additional contextual step, the self-identification segment. So after our conversations with the sales organization, we're able to expand that a bit into really various more segmentation options and provide that in the form experience.
And at the end of the day, like we said, a bunch of times, the form really is the gateway to demand generation. So what you and the team were able to do was like add on some additional questions onto the form so that, users could kind of self-select or leads could self-select which audience they fit into. Now, that can be dicey, right? Because as we all know, adding more questions onto a form, you run the risk of killing your conversion rate. So how did you strike that balance and make sure that you were able to get more data from that prospect, but also not kill this company's conversion rates?
It is concerning. In general, the shorter form experience, the more leads you're going to capture through it. So it becomes a game of how much effort and friction we want to have in that form experience and how much information is actually required for the post lead prospecting experience with marketing and sales to actually qualify and nurture that lead. So it is a fine balance. Um, yes, we need to capture some basic PII information. But what we found is for these more contextual based questions, who are you? What sort of company do you work for? How big is your team size? It's different than company size. We're able to layer that into the lead form experience quite organically in a multi-step fashion. So we're not throwing all the kind of new questions at the user that to them would be kind of a pattern interrupt. We all know what a normal lead form experience is like. We start asking these additional questions. It can be kind of strange by splitting the form experience up into kind of this engagement type multi-step module. We can lead with these easy to answer segmentation questions and then follow on with the PII. I think in summary, how do we gather the bare information that we need to actually kind of get the base MQL definition out of this lead? And then what is the most important segment type question we can ask, or questions one or two that we can then add on to the front end of the experience? You do not need your entire website redesigned.
You probably just need smart wins. How about 24 of them?
And we put them in one playbook, website optimization, quick wins playbook.
If you want more pipeline without waiting on your dev team, the link's in the notes. Yeah, I think there are two elements to it, just to recap what you said. One is, splitting up that form, because we all have seen those huge, very impersonal forms. So splitting up that forms and asking some of those questions in a step-by-step way. That's best practice. We've seen that a million times over. The second one is try to make those questions relevant. So if you're asking them questions about what segment that they're in, they're much more likely to fill it out if they think it's going to be relevant to their post-form experience, meaning they're going to get more relevant content, their interaction or engagement is going to be sort of more relevant to their use case and their business. So at the end of the day, relevance always wins. And if you can show that you're guiding them through a journey that's more specific to them, you're much more likely to get people to fill out those questions on the form. So really think about the framing. And then the third one, of course, is test your way into it, right? I mean, we're running these as tests, so we're taking our best practices and all of the experience that we have and applying it to the form to capture the segmentation information. But don't just set it and forget it, right? Test your way into it, measure the impact on not just the form fill, but the conversion rates all the way down to pipeline and maybe even revenue if that's relevant, because you may actually get less form fills, but the quality coming through and ultimately the conversion to pipe and revenue could be much bigger. So make them relevant, split up the form, and make sure your testing and measuring is, at the end of the day, the way you do it.
I just want to expand briefly on the last point you made, where yes, at a certain point there will be a trade-off between the quantity of leads that are flowing through and the quality of them. Sure, we're adding a bit extra to the form experience. I think some of these lower intent users will likely drop off and not be enticed, but we're asking very relevant questions. People want experiences that are very individualized for them. We're not asking intrusive questions, right? We're asking kind of fairly simple to answer items. And people are very willing to provide that information with the assumed trade-off that they're going to receive a much more individualized experience.
And at the end of the day, none of our B2B clients has ever come to us and said, we need more conversions and we don't care about quality at all. It's always that trade-off between volume and quality. And in fact, most of them say we would take less leads if they were higher quality, because that's not going to burden the sales team with, a bunch of unresponsive or low quality kind of junk leads. So I think that's really important, making sure you're measuring both on the conversion rate and the data quality. And then the other thing is what happens after that form fill. So that filling out the form and capturing this data is great, but what it really unlocks is what you can do with that prospect after they fill out the form. Some of the approaches and some of the things that our clients doing is, thinking about more relevant nurture sequences from their marketing team. So if they can identify the audience in the segment that prospect is in, then they can send them much more relevant content from a nurture perspective. They have SDRs reaching out to these prospects. They can make that initial touch much more relevant and make the offer much more relevant to, reduce what is a relatively high unresponsive rate, because right now their outbound is generic, right? So if you know, again, what the pain points are, what segment that prospect is, and you can tailor that outreach much more effectively. And then, the third one is optimizing paid media, things like retargeting. The way you're displaying ads and the offer that you're putting in front of that prospect can be much more relevant. So once you have that better segmentation data coming into your marketing automation or CRM, there's a lot of opportunities to unlock in terms of campaigns and ultimately, getting them to convert the pipeline.
Yeah, and I just want to quickly re-emphasize that the quality of this data that we're receiving directly from the user, from the lead, is extremely high. We all have issues with these enrichment providers, some noise, some lower quality signals that they provide. It's coming directly from the user. It has enabled so much, and it's very clean data to work with.
Yeah, I think, in many ways, the thing to emphasize here is that the form isn't just some front end thing that you're slapping on the site and it's a way to collect lead data. If you think of it as a way to properly segment and identify your audience and as a connection to sort of your post form growth levers, like your nurture paths, your retargeting solutions, the way you're even attributing leads and the channels that they're coming from, then it becomes this infrastructure for growth and tying all of that together. And to your point, data providers might not be able to get you effective segmentation data that's actually kind of relevant to both your business and your customers. But if your prospects are willing to fill it out and give you that information, then you can't get any better than that. That's the gold standard for data collection.
Yeah, definitely.
Maybe we can sort of wrap this up with some key takeaways. So I think top of mind is you're not just capturing leads, you're capturing context about that prospect. And you want to think about that not as just a sort of point in time interaction, they're filling out a form, but a way to initiate a conversation and multiple actions that are more relevant than just generic sequences and generic outreach. On the testing side, any recommendations on how you kind of test your way into this?
Look, I know that folks will just want to roll this out. Maybe there's pressure from other teams to start gathering this sort of data. Run an experiment. Get the initial read on what sort of impact is actually occurring at the top of the funnel. How should you implement this? Again, talk to sales. Maybe you already have an intuitive sense of what additional contextual based segmentation data you're missing that would help power and really help personalize some of these down funnel experiences with paid and automation. Identify those and then add them to the form, run an A/B experiment for initially, measure the top of funnel impact. The data will be flowing downstream and teams can start playing with that as they will. And then, take it from there.
Yeah, and definitely I would suggest, think about and start building the audiences. Once you've tested your way into this form, don't just sit around and collect the data, actually build your audiences. So our clients are using this self-segmentation data to power, their retargeting, I said, LinkedIn display audiences, personalized nurture campaigns. You're collecting that data, use it to build more effective audiences and campaigns. The final point here is, this is really kind of growth engineering, right? You're thinking about how to improve that customer action, capturing more relevant contextual data, and then, tying it into subsequent campaigns. All of this doesn't happen at once. It's about building that system and muscle that connects the website and top of the funnel experience to kind of the downstream conversion path. So think about that, sort of full system and how you engineer and experiment your way towards it.
Great ending.
All right. Well, thanks so much. Talk to you later.
Yep. See ya.
All right, that's a wrap for this episode of the Revenue Funnel Optimization Podcast.
If you like what you heard, hit subscribe. We've got more tactical stuff always coming out.
You can drop us a comment or share this with someone who'd find it helpful.
And if you're ready to dive deep into your funnel, check the link in the show notes to book a free call with the team.
Thanks for hanging out with us. Catch you next time.